A lot of bad things are being found out about the hoax. Greatest hoax in the history of our country. And it was an illegal hoax and a very dangerous hoax. And a lot of bad things have been found out about Mueller and the gang. So I would like to hear that conversation. Yeah, I would like to hear it personally. So whatever they want me to do, I'll do.
So that was the president yesterday talking about Rick Grenell, the acting DNI, who is now giving up that job. He doesn't want that position, I don't think. So now they have voted for John Ratcliffe to be sworn in. He was sworn in as DNI. So right before he left, he decided to declassify some more of the conversations between Flynn and Kislyak. And he's leaving it up to Ratcliffe whether or not that will be released to the public. Let's bring in Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins, member of House Judiciary Committee. Good morning to you, Congressman.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning. So we have that information. We also know that Congressman Nunes, he wants Republicans to expand the investigation into the Mueller team, says that will happen. So what happens next now that we have all this information?
Well, the best thing is Rick Grenell was a breath of fresh air as acting DNI. He actually came in, provided transparency, provided the things that we have been looking for those of us who've been fighting this battle against what we knew was a corrupt cabal that had tried to attack President Trump as a candidate and then try to disrupt his early part of his presidency, and then led into the Mueller investigation, which we found was a complete flop. So it was I was so glad to see he did what he did, and now I'm proud to have my friend John Ratcliffe, who is a great colleague we've worked together on this, will be in charge from here on out. And I think we're going to finally start getting the answers to what the president has said should never happen to any other president. It should have never happened to him.
And Congressman Collins, of course, running for the Senate seat. Johnny Isaacson retired and left vacant. And Kelly Loeffler is in now. Congressman, in this scenario, the transcripts will be released between Flynn and Kislyak. If in those transcripts Flynn says, hey, don't overreact to these sanctions that the Obama administration put on, we're going to reset things when we take office. Is that the smoking gun that shows he's corrupt?
No, there's no smoking gun that shows he's corrupt. I think what we got to have is these are conversations between world leaders. I mean, is that any more of a smoking gun, whether that's in there or not? When Obama leaned over to Medvedev and said, hey, just wait till after the election, we'll do things right. You have to have conversations between leaders and world leaders. And I think what we've got here, though, is this was not about a conversation. This was about getting at a president. Let's make this very clear. The whole investigation was centered around if we can get Flynn or we can get others to either lie or to do something, then we can get at President Trump, then candidate Trump. This was all about power and making sure that President Trump's administration did not get off on the right foot.
Well, exactly. And that could be one of the reasons why, Congressman, the President of the United States is urging House members to vote no on FISA. He tweeted this out: I hope all Republican House members vote no on FISA until such time as our country is able to determine how and why the greatest political, criminal, and subversive scandal in USA history took place. You understand his point of view, but at the same time, that tweet throws a monkey wrench into whether or not that's going to pass. But you've got to admit that because it is a secret court and a secret process, so many people had no idea what some unscrupulous people may have been doing behind the scenes, the DOJ and the FBI. You can understand why he would say that, right?
Oh, I completely understand. There's been no greater person on TV or your show or any other show has been critical of the FISA process and critical of it, that we have to make changes to the reauthorization of this. I think we've made some changes in the House. The Senate added to that. There's still some concern. If the president wants to continue this fight, then we can continue that fight. But it cannot go on the way as normal. And there is a movement right now, though, that we need to watch for. And some on Capitol Hill just simply want to say, well, it's too controversial, let's just reauthorize it and move on. That cannot happen. And we just can't do that. This has got to have some work. Hopefully we'll find out today how we can move forward.
Okay, the president said to the governor of North Carolina, I give you 1 week. You have to let me know if we can have full capacity at the RNC at the end of August, in 3 more months. And he's not able to do that yet. He hasn't given the president an answer. So the president said, maybe I'll move it to Florida, maybe I'll move it to Georgia, your state, or maybe Texas. So your governor did tweet this out. He said, with world-class facilities, restaurants, hotels, and workforce, Georgia would be honored to safely host the Republican National Convention. We hope you will consider the Peach State, Donald Trump. What's your reaction to that, and where would it be? Would it be in Atlanta, or have you even talked about it?
Well, it would be great, but we have a saying down here, Georgia's always on your mind. Well, I think the RNC and for the rest of the country, Republicans, Georgia's on our mind. This is a great place to be. It's a great place for the president. It's a great place for us, and we're proud and agree with the governor. If they want to come here, if North Carolina doesn't want it, come on down to Georgia. We got plenty for you.
Yeah, the mayor of Atlanta doesn't want it. Shocker. Let's talk about you for a second. You're up by 40 points in the last poll, first week in May, over the sitting senator appointed by Brian Kemp. Do you call on her to drop out, even though that she's been exonerated from insider trading?
Well, let's be clear. She'll need to decide what she needs to do on that. But I think exoneration is interesting. I've never seen somebody more excited about a dropping of an investigation, of one investigation. There's others going on. Since the last people that was that excited were Hillary Clinton and Andrew McCabe when they were excited that they were not being charged by the FBI. This is more than that. This is about actually looking into what he actually did. The people of Georgia will look at what happened on these insider trading. While she was profiting, they were hurting. And the people of Georgia will get to decide what happens here.
All right. Live from Georgia in Atlanta right now, Doug Collins, Congressman. Sir, thank you very much.